Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the complimentary ICMI webinar, 5 Steps to Modernize Your Contact Center, sponsored by Genesys. I'm Erica Strother, Community Specialist here at ICMI, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, let's take care of a few housekeeping items. First, make sure you disable your pop-up blocker if it's turned on. You will notice there are several icons at the bottom of the console window. The first one allows you to see the presentation slides, so make sure that this one is maximized. Next is the Q&A icon. We will be conducting a live Q&A at the end of today's webinar, and you can participate by asking questions at any time during our presentation. Just type your question into that window and then click Submit. Now, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the presentation, you can just click the question mark icon on the console to access the event help guide. Clicking on the other icons on the console will give you access to speaker bios, information about our sponsor Genesys, as well as information about upcoming ICMI events. And speaking of upcoming ICMI events, it is not too late to register and join ICMI in Chicago for Contact Center Demo and Conference. You can learn more by visiting that link that you see here on the screen, and be sure to use the promo code for a special discount. Now, before we get going, I do want to mention that this presentation will be made available for on-demand viewing, and you'll receive an email in the next couple of days with instructions for viewing the recorded presentation. You can also download a PDF version of the slides through the console shortly after this presentation ends. And as you're watching today, I do want to encourage you to be social. You can access your Twitter, your Facebook, or your LinkedIn accounts directly through this event console. So please keep the conversations going and share what you learn. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. We're honored to have 2 esteemed industry experts speaking today. And speaking on behalf of ICMI is Sheila McGee-Smith. Sheila is Principal Analyst at McGee-Smith Analytics. I'm also joined by Kay Phelps. Kay is Senior Product Marketing Manager for Genesys. I know that Sheila and Kay both have some very interesting information to share with you all today, but before we get going, one more quick reminder. Please use the hashtags that you see here on the screen and keep the conversations going on social media. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Erica. And we're going to start by talking a little bit about, before we get into the 5 things that Kay and I believe can be done to start changing your contact center and modernizing it, what we're going to do is talk about some of the trends that are requiring that changes be made. And so the first one is new business models. And I think a great example is U2's release of its album into iTunes last couple of weeks. We've moved from physical delivery of a lot of products to cloud delivery. Things people used to walk into a store to buy now gets delivered over the internet, over the cloud. And that change in business model may often means a change in how customers are serviced, how they care to be serviced, and just one example of a changing business models and how that can impact customer care. Wearable technology is another, sort of changing technology focus that is going to require business changes in terms of customer care and customer support. Think of the Apple Watch, the Fitbit and Jawbone fitness trackers, solutions like Google Glass. All of these have customer care implications. Think about each of these types of devices feeding data, perhaps even in real time, that agents may have to react to. A great example may be location status, that as the location of a customer calling in changes, how the agent supports them may have to change. And so being able to support that is something companies are going to have to start thinking about as wearable technology becomes more prevalent. The rise of millennials. This has implications, I think, both for the buyers of company products, but also on customer care itself in 2 different ways. First, customers are going to want different methods of communications, millennial customers. As we have this rising percentage of millennials, their communications wants are different than people like myself, the boomers. The other way that the rise of millennials impacts customer care is the rising percentage of millennials in the agent workforce. So issues like retention, while always issues in contact centers for many years, how do our strategies for retention change for millennials? What they want is different than perhaps what a boomer wanted, what a Gen Xer wanted. So we have to rethink how we do things like workforce optimization. Speaking of which, big data. We're in an age now where, I was recently giving a presentation at a contact center conference and asked the crowd what percent of the contact center managers and IT managers, what percent of their companies were doing 100% recording. And a very large percentage, north of 80% of the audience, said that they are in fact doing 100% recording. But when you ask that follow-up question about how that is changing how quality management is done, or how the company is gathering intelligence from that data, the number of hands is much lower. And so, big data for the contact center, probably the number one driver of that data for us is the recordings, which are so rich in information. And, trends like big data are driving us to think about how do we make better use of the data that we're collecting. And finally, the age of the customer. What does this mean? It means we're in a time when customers have so much more power than they ever had before. They're so much more empowered. And as a result, they're demanding a new level of customer service. So how does that demand for customer service, how do we know that that's happening? So what I'm showing here is data from a survey that's done every year since 2007 by a company called the CFI Group, which is run by a professor of marketing at the University of Michigan. And the Contact Center Satisfaction Index from the years 2007 through 2012, what it showed was going out and asking consumers how happy they were with the support they got from contact centers. There was a fairly high and rising percentage of customers who felt that they were getting good customer service. But what we did was we saw a dramatic drop, a statistically significant drop in 2013, where the percentage dropped from 77 to 69%. And the folks at the CFI Group, had a couple of hypotheses on why that may have happened. The first was, the fourth quarter of 2013, when the data was collected, was an interesting time. There was low consumer confidence. There had been a very dysfunctional government shutdown. There was confusion over the Affordable Care Act. And, people were just, reaching a breaking point and changing how they felt they were being supported. The second hypothesis, and the one that really resonates a little bit better for me, is that after years of steady growth, consumers had built up this expectation of great things to come and, continuing improvement in a connected company experience. And 2013 may have been that year that the expectations finally overtook the ability to deliver. That an 8-point drop was reality versus expectations. We're all walking around with these very powerful mobile and smartphone devices that companies could be using better to service us both from a customer care and from a buying perspective. So I'm going to turn it over to Kay now to talk about, how some companies are dealing with these challenges.
Thank you, Sheila. All right. So, Sheila, just want to tell everybody, as Sheila talks about a trend, then what I will do is talk about how as contact center managers and directors, how you can address each of those trends, and then I'll give an example of a company who has taken that step. So the first one we'll talk about today is going beyond multi-channel. So as Sheila talked about, consumers today simply expect more. What's probably fostered those heightened expectations is that we do encounter companies who deliver what we call an omni-channel experience. So that means we send an email to a company, then we engage in web chat with them, and then make a phone call, and lo and behold, the agent who answers that call has full knowledge of all of those previous interactions. So really, the challenge to businesses today is that consumers are starting to expect every company to offer this type of experience. Most of you today do offer multi-channel and some cross-channel, for example, moving from a web chat to a phone call. But omni-channel is what your customers really want. It means seamlessly moving between all of these modes of communication and that the agent has knowledge of these previous interactions. The customer doesn't have to spend any time bringing the agent up to speed. So not only are you delivering a terrific customer experience with omnichannel, you're potentially shaving seconds, if not minutes, off phone calls and web chats. Let's look at a company, ESRI. They are a world premier provider of GIS mapping systems, and that's geographical information systems. And their businesses that use this type of technology range from financial institutions to retailers, utility companies, transportation, really the whole spectrum of businesses. And with ESRI, as their business expanded, they found that it was becoming increasingly difficult to meet service levels because of the additional complexity, because of the agents needing to be highly skilled in specific areas. And they also encountered a problem with agents often not having the customer records or all the information that they needed. And so they were challenged with low first contact resolution. Michael Kim, their Director of Support Services, told us we needed to stop and rethink because customer satisfaction was falling. So they implemented an omni-channel solution that enabled them to give customers a choice of channels and to equip the same agent to handle a customer interaction even when it crossed channels. And now, with each contact that a customer makes, the agent has access to all of those previous interactions, no matter how that customer contacted the business. And they've had some pretty phenomenal results. Customer satisfaction ratings jumped from 82% to 93%. They saw a 25-point increase in Net Promoter Score. That's huge. And first contact resolution skyrocketed from near zero to 70%. So step one on the path to a future-ready contact center is delivering this omni-channel customer experience. Let's take a moment for a poll question. So, are your customers expecting you to give them an omni-channel customer experience? So, let's answer. Do you see this as an expectation? Your customers see it. Really don't expect it today. Do some expect it? Do most or all of them expect it? Or perhaps you don't really know. So let's.
So, Kay, I've gone ahead and answered that, and I think at least some expect it. So let's see what the results of our poll are.
So we're seeing a lot of responses here. I'll give it just one more moment. So it's not an expectation. Some expect it, or most or all expect it. Okay, let's see what the results are. So only 2% of you do not see this being a customer expectation. Some really don't know, but it looks like the vast majority of you are in the category that I would have expected, that either some or all of your customers are expecting that. And really a good follow-on question that I didn't ask in a poll would have been how many of you are delivering that today. And of course, if it's an expectation and you're not able to do it today, then you know this is something on your to-do list. Moving to the next trend is Sheila.
Hi. So, I've used this graphic over the years to sort of show the evolution of contact center technology in the 90s. From a technology and infrastructure perspective, what companies were really trying to do was figure out how to get voice calls, to the most appropriate agent. They're really trying to do a better job of assisted service, live agent service. And things like skills-based routing and queuing brought us along that path. Then in the 2000s, there was a lot of work around self-service. Think about 1999 when we had the major financial upheaval. And there was a lot of concern about the cost of assisted service of live agents. And so a lot of companies investigated and deployed self-service solutions. First voice, and then as the decade went on, increasingly internet-based self-service solutions. So if we were to characterize then the current decade, it's probably a decade where we're trying to Kay's point, bring self and assisted solutions together better to create more omni-channel experiences, and specifically, addressing the entire customer experience more than just assisted or self in individual silos. One element of that is proactively addressing customer care issues. So before they ask, taking care of customer concerns. So customers only call contact centers for two reasons, right? To get information or to get a problem resolved, right? Having live agents in contact centers to answer these calls is probably the most costly way to service customers. Why not proactively reach out to your customers to share the information that you have about what they need to know? Great example. I live in New Hampshire. My electric company has a very active Twitter presence because we lose electric power a lot up in New Hampshire. Ice storms, wind storms, and lots of wires in the trees. And Twitter is a way for them to proactively send information out to customers that says, we know this town is down. This is our estimated time to repair. By sending out information in a format over cell phones that people can still get when power is down, they avoid those calls coming in who just want to know, are you aware that we're down, and when do you think we're going to be back up again? So proactive responses to customers are increasingly something that can be done to improve customer experience that we're delivering. And Kay is going to talk a little bit more about that now.
Thanks, Sheila. So the next step in proactively and future-proofing your contact center, as Sheila said, what you really want is no contact resolution. So that means you're proactively reaching out to customers and to your prospects with information they want and need before they contact you. So you can send them reminders of appointments, delivery dates. You can let them know that their subscription or their policy is up for renewal. You can update them on when a new product is going to be available or when the delivery date has been updated. You can also give them information, and Sheila gave some great examples of this, of information they need. It might be things like school closures or road closures, weather alerts, product recalls. You can invite them to upcoming webinars, conferences, seminars, store openings. What better way to build customer loyalty? What you're doing when you do these things is that you are selling them on your company without a sales pitch. And in the process, you're lowering costs because you're deciding how to reach out to them and when. You're using lower-cost channels to do that and preempting expensive phone calls. And in the process, as we talked about, you're boosting customer loyalty and retention. Let's look at a case study now of a company who decided to proactively reach out via SMS. So, obviously, there's a plethora of ways to implement this second step of proactive engagement. But what Procter & Gamble decided to do is to make sure that their customers knew that high-efficiency detergents were required to get the proper cleaning efficiency with high-efficiency washers. And they also wanted to make sure that consumers looked to Procter & Gamble to provide their fabric care needs. So they implemented a Tide Text for Tips SMS marketing campaign, and it was designed to engage consumers by offering things like laundry tips and stain solution approaches and special offers from the Tide brand. And so what they do is to send an SMS message to opted-in consumers, but they only do it every couple of weeks so as not to overwhelm them. And the incentive to opt in is a chance to win a year's supply of Tide high-efficiency detergent. And the result is that they quickly garnered more than 48,000 subscribers with low opt-out rates. So, again, this is just one example of very many ways that you can proactively engage with your customers. Back to Sheila.
Thank you, Kay. We talked a little bit about millennials as a driving force for change in customer experience and customer care. Here's a graphic that I created last year with some great data from AARP, which somehow in the recent past decided that I needed to be on their mailing list. We won't talk about why. But sort of dividing up the workforce, the participation in the workforce of the various generations. So surprising to me, at least, was we still have about 5% of the workforce from the World War II period. Boomers like myself, 38%. Gen X, 32%. But a large and growing percentage of millennials. And two things here. The one I talked about earlier was trying to develop strategies for millennials. But looking at this graphic, what it shows you is the challenge of being able to create retention and training and coaching programs that address the needs of each of these groups, all of which are represented in the agent workforce that your companies have today. And again, as I said earlier, I think retention is the biggest ongoing challenge. Today's millennial workers require different strategies to foster high retention. And in the boomer age, give somebody medical care, give them a decent number of vacation days that grow over time, and these were the kinds of benefits that were able to drive retention for companies. And Kay's going to talk about, some of the differences now and some of the things that workforce optimization can do to help.
So step 3, optimize your workforce. You're probably already using some of the tools in that toolbox. You're doing forecasting and scheduling and adherence, but what else is in there that's going to help you manage the workforce? So you can boost agent retention by making your agents happier. Well, how do you do that? You can give them a web-based application that lets them request time off, that lets them trade shifts or bid on a shift. They can list their preferences. What day do I need to be off? When do I like to come in and leave? So they may not get this entire wish list, but they'll likely get some of their requests satisfied and will be happy about it. And also, it's a great opportunity to take a look to see what coaching and training tools are available to you. You can enrich your employees by looking at areas where improvements need to be made. Do their handle times need improvements? Do their skills need a boost? And then you can automatically incorporate customized training at the optimum time. So what you're looking at is employee availability, and then the availability of either trainer-led or e-learning sessions, and potential service level impacts, and schedule it at the ideal time for the agent and for the business. Consider using speech and text analytics if you're not doing this already. Take a look, because these solutions are immensely more affordable and more useful, more easier to incorporate into your business than they were even a few years ago. If your company is required to adhere to regulatory adherences, then even one regulatory violation could result in a fine that would exceed the cost of this solution. You can also use speech and text analytics to do things like uncover problems. So, heaven forbid, are your agents using inappropriate language, or are they not following scripts? You can also uncover opportunities. Are customers saying, I would buy that if only, or I can't find, or I would like for this product to do. So great opportunities to be ferreted out as well. And workforce optimization can help you cut costs. It can help you write staff across all of your channels, not just voice, but helping you meet service levels across all channels for every skill without costly overstaffing. And it's also cutting costs when you're able to retain agents, as we talked about, giving agents a variety of work, especially millennials, will also help and to meet their requests for specific times off or a specific work schedule. All of these things are going to factor into your bottom line in a positive way. So let's look at a case study now. So DNB, they are the largest financial services group in Norway with over 2 million consumers. And so what they were challenged with was an accurate forecast for all channels and to deliver a seamless experience, again, across all the channels to ensure fair scheduling and first contact resolution. So what DNB did was to take a step back and look at KPIs for agent performance. In the past, they had looked at the number of the number of calls that an agent took in an hour, essentially average talk time. Today, what they look at is how many calls were resolved the first time. So they saw a significant improvement in FCR, first contact resolution, with the changes that they made. And taking this approach, even if an individual agent talk time might increase somewhat, overall, the total number of minutes of talk time in your contact center could drop significantly. And so DNB, taking this approach, did see a significant impact in some of their metrics in first contact resolution. Their VP of Customer Satisfaction, Gress Smith-Meyer, said, we measure customer satisfaction down to the individual agent. Each team leader has a score for his or her team, and each agent gets a personal score. And then if a particular customer is dissatisfied, the team leader calls him or her back and tries to resolve any issues. And it often turns an unhappy customer into a delighted customer. And so what they did is that they trained agents to become experts in specific areas across channels and empowered their agents. both the customer and the agent feel more satisfied, and they're seeing lower agent turnover than they had previously. You know, Sheila talked about the way that millennials like to work and how it can be different from other generations, and they can be very almost feed off of constant changes in let me give attention to that. Sometimes I think we almost foster ADD with instant messaging and these sorts of things. But millennials thrive on those. If they can handle several chat sessions at the same time, they may be getting a voice phone call here and there. They're probably going to be much happier workers and more likely to stay with your company. And now back to Sheila for the next trend.
So customer effort is a new measurement of how we're doing as companies supporting customers who call in. And the Corporate Executive Board conducted interviews with customer service leaders and studied data from 75,000 consumers, right? And what they've graphed here is the difference between customer satisfaction as a predictor of how much more a consumer will do business with you, and in terms of a repurchase, and in terms of increased spend, okay? So customer satisfaction is a measure that has been around for a while and that we've been using for many years. And as you see on the graph, it actually does a job of predicting whether somebody will repurchase from you and if they will spend more money over time, okay? But probably around 10 years ago, we found that Net Promoter Score was actually did a better job on both of those parameters, right? So Net Promoter Score being very simple surveys that ask the question, would you recommend this company and or its products and services to someone else? And so Net Promoter Score became the preferred measure and in some cases just another measure of how well we're doing in the contact center supporting the customers. But customer effort is a newer measure, and as you can see in the graphic, it improves repurchase and increased spend at higher rates than either customer satisfaction or Net Promoter Score. So what is customer effort? Customer effort is how difficult or easy it is for a customer to get done what they want to get done when they contact a company. So interesting point. I was talking about this particular concept, customer effort, at a conference recently, and someone came up to me after the conference and said, I'm not sure how I feel about customer effort as a measure. I called into some provider of some service, and I had a very simple call. It was easy to get in. They answered the phone, but they didn't answer my question. And so I had to call again and call somebody different, and it took me 3 or 4 calls to get this done. And what I said to him was, customer effort there would be measured by how long it took to get to resolution, not that first call and how long you waited and to get answered. So keep in mind that customer effort should be that entire experience getting to resolution. And that gives a great example of how you would measure effort, how many different calls, how many different company representatives, right? And what customer effort, I think, has helped to foster is more of an emphasis on customer journeys. Effort has to do with not just how many calls, right, but it may have to do with how many different channels I may have taken during the course of trying to complete either a purchase or to get support. As we know, and there's lots of data being collected on this, people start their journeys often on the web. They may go from web to social media. And if you think of Yelp, for example, as social media, that's often a test. First, what restaurants are nearby. Number 2, what are the reviews of those restaurants? Can I get a reservation there, and how long does that take for me to accomplish that? And then finally, what's my experience? So that's a great example of a journey. And what companies are realizing is we need to understand the journey that someone took in order to impact how happy they are with us. So I think customer effort and customer journey go hand in hand. And increasingly what we're finding is customer effort and the effort they take during their journey is really the new customer satisfaction, a new way of looking at how do we think about the service that we're providing and how it impacts the bottom line of the business. So Kay is going to take it back now and talk a little bit about customer journey analytics.
So yes, as Sheila emphasized, it's important to look beyond traditional metrics, but to look at new metrics like this customer effort score. So with step 4 on the journey to modernizing your contact center, you're going to be moving beyond reporting to analytics to understand not just what happened, but why it happened. For example, why did customer satisfaction skyrocket in June? We're delighted, but do we know why? Perhaps if you have implemented an omnichannel solution, then maybe you have taken measures like reaching out to them to let them know about how to resolve a problem that you've had in your product, or to let them know that a new product's available. So what else did you do in your contact center that could have positively impacted customer satisfaction? Why did talk time decrease? Were our customers happier with text chats or with voice calls? And is there a correlation between some of these measures? For example, is there a correlation between perhaps talk time and agent knowledge of a customer's previous interactions, so that that omnichannel implementation meant that the agent wasn't having to spend time with a customer, being brought up to speed on those previous interactions? So with analytics, really, the message is that you can answer these type of questions. You're more readily able to identify and then to fix any problem areas, and therefore optimizing your customer's journey. Let's look at a company, Sabre, who used analytics to do just the things we're talking about. So they are a big technology company employing over 10,000 people. They're based in Texas, but their employees span over 60 countries. Their brands include companies like Travelocity, which probably all of you have heard of. So challenges. They needed insight into workload management and call volumes. They lacked a single view of customer history across all of the channels. And then their upgrades were complex and hard to integrate with their legacy systems. So when Sabre implemented a unified reporting and analytics solution, this robust omnichannel solution gave them complete visibility into the customer journey. It's based on open technology instead of proprietary systems, so that simplified their upgrades and integrations, addressing that challenge that we just talked about. And they are also finding it easier to add new channels as needed. So their unified reporting and analytics solutions lets them readily support new customer channels of customer communication. And back to Sheila for the next trend. Oh, first, wait a moment. Let's take a poll. Would multi-channel reporting and analytics benefit your company? So, not really? Yes, but you're not sure how to proceed to make it happen? Yes, it's on your roadmap. Yes, you already have it.
So I did a pretty good job guessing last time, Kay. So I'm going to say that our big answer is going to be yes, but I don't know how to make it happen. So let's see how my prediction powers are this time around. I don't always do well, so we'll see. Also.
Answers pouring in. Let's see. And Sheila, are you good or what? Let's push the results out. So, the vast majority of you are saying yes. Yes, but I don't know how to make it happen, just as Sheila predicted, is our most predominant answer here. And a significant number of you, about 35% of you, have it in your roadmap. And kudos, applause to the 13% of you who already have it. Great results, thank you. And now what we'll do is move to the next topic for Sheila to discuss. So, Sheila, back to you.
So I love this graphic, right? And what I'm trying to convey with this is how customers view companies and the service experience that they expect to have. So they call in, or they go to your website, or they hit your mobile application, and they have an expectation. They have something they need to get done. And their feeling is, I have this expectation, I am going to have an interaction, there's going to be a promise made of some kind, and it's going to be delivered. And it's all going to be like magic, like a pretty rainbow. And that's how life is. The reality, however, is that this is a closer picture of what customer care in companies is often like, where the interaction is done by a contact center, the promise is made based on certain parameters that are probably parameters that are kind of frozen in time and not based on real-time considerations. And off goes that request into the never land of a different silo. I mean, we can all think of a myriad of examples. The ones that come to mind for me are things like, cable support, right? Or satellite TV. You call in, they say, you will get your equipment on this day, somebody will come to your house on this day, and it will cost this. And then none of those things are accurate predictions of what actually happens as you try to get service. So these silos and the disconnect often between contact centers and the rest of the business are a challenge that may be able to be faced with modernization. And I'm going to hand it over to Kay to talk about what some of the possibilities are.
Thank you, Sheila. And so before I move to step 5, something that Sheila said really resonated with me, and that's, talking about the experience with the satellite TV company. If they had used proactive contact to let Sheila know that the original scheduled date was going to slip a bit, it's not ideal. It doesn't make her happy, but it certainly makes her happier than them not showing up on the day it was promised. So again, so many ways that we can use technology to proactively increase customer satisfaction when we can't give them what they want when they want it. So step 5, managing the offline or back office work is a step in your future-ready contact center, because the bottom line is this. Your customer or your prospect's perception of your company doesn't depend solely on their phone call or their web chat or how you responded to their email. You may have linked the customer journey through all of these touch points, but is the supporting offline work completed in a timely manner? Your agent's performance could be flawless, and yet the overall customer perception could be negative if the back office follow-through isn't up to par. Unfortunately, it really is least common denominator. One weak link can damage the customer relationship. So really the question to ask is, do you have visibility into the follow-up work and whether it's done once it leaves your agent's hand? If the workload isn't distributed among all of the available resources, it could be overwhelming in one area, leaving customers waiting while back office workers are sitting idle in another location. So let's look at a customer story that gives that very example. So the New Zealand Ministry of Justice, their collections unit, is responsible for collecting over 1 million fines a year. Their outstanding collection debt had ballooned in U.S. dollars to over $600 million, and it was growing. So what they decided to do was completely change the way they operated. So they had 26 district collection units, each operating on its own. And so in some offices, people were underutilized, even though they had an overall increase in uncollected fines. And employees could cherry pick and choose what they wanted to work on. So that meant that large or more problematic fines went uncollected because the staff understandably preferred to work on the easier, less demanding cases. So they resolved this challenge with the installation of a centralized workload distribution system which blends those type of work items along with phone calls for those workers that they want to be able to handle both types of work. And then it's assigned according to rules that are prioritized. All the work is prioritized nationally now rather than district by district. And so what it does is that enables them to work more effectively and efficiently. They've reduced the backlog and increased their collection capacity without adding resources. So their GM of the collections unit, Briar Patel, says, with the new way of working, we've been able to remove the siloed mentality that Sheila had talked about earlier. So he said everybody's now on the same team, regardless of where they're located. We have the visibility and control we need, and we've been able to meet our goals of increasing the collections rate and resolving fines faster and minimizing operating costs. A real success story. So now what's next? We've talked about the 5 steps to modernizing your contact center, going beyond multi-channel to omni-channel, proactively engaging your customers, optimizing your workforce using tools like speech and text analytics, stepping beyond reporting to analyze the complete customer journey, and then managing the back office work to ensure follow-through. So you probably have some of these steps that you need to take in your contact center today. How do you get buy-in to proceed? Let's talk about a couple of ideas. To get buy-in within your company, if you have a customer experience officer or a chief customer officer, you're going to want to link arms with him or her. When you start talking with that customer experience officer about how you can provide a more nimble and personalized customer experience that keeps you from losing ground with competitors, you're going to get their attention. But you'll also want to talk about the hard benefits, not just attracting and retaining customers, but hard benefits with the person that controls the purse strings. When agents have knowledge of previous interactions, you're simply cutting talk time or chat time and reducing number of transfers. We all know that time and money, time is money in a contact center. Analysts say that 60 to 70%, and I've heard as much as 80% of the costs of a contact center are in agent salaries. So cutting talk time is going to result in huge savings. And then when agents feel like they have a say in their schedules, when they feel like they're treated fairly, that they're able to take the training they need, they're going to be happier and less likely to leave. You improve agent retention. You cut hiring and training costs. How much does it cost to hire and train even one new agent? And then multiply that by the number of agents in your the agents you lose every year in your contact center, and start looking at how these type of tools could cut retention and cut costs. So, do you really have to do all the things we've talked about today, these 5 steps to modernize your contact center? Well, no. You can hobble along with what you're doing today rather than taking these steps. But you potentially lose in the long run. You're not attracting new customers because you're too difficult to do business with. And the loyalty of existing customers may start to ebb when they see your competitors making it easy, doing the things that we've talked about. So you really need to evaluate whether the contact center infrastructure you have today is going to support the customer needs that you have for tomorrow. Because when you have the right foundation to do all of these things, you're on the path to be able to readily and relatively easily future-proof your contact center. And in the process, it's probably going to be easier for you to manage as well and to keep your customers for life.
Well, thank you, Kay and Sheila.
Let's move to back. I'll hand it back to Erica, who will handle our Q&A.
Yeah, thank you both. As I did mention earlier, we do want to save just a little bit of time for some of your questions. Before we do that, 2 quick things. You should have just seen a pop-up for a feedback form. If you don't mind just taking about 60 seconds to fill that out for us, it would be a great help as we prepare for future presentations. Second thing, I want to mention that if we don't have a chance to answer one of your questions live here in the next few minutes, that we will absolutely make sure that your questions are answered offline after our presentation. So, that being said, why don't we dive in? We have a few minutes left, so Sheila and Kay, I would love to hear your thoughts on a couple of questions that I've seen come in from the audience, and I'm going to start with you, Sheila. So you talked about the customer effort score, and that has been such a popular theme among our audience. We had Matt Dixon keynote at one of our conferences earlier this year. So this is a question that I've seen time and time again, but can you explain what are the measures that typically comprise customer effort score?
Certainly. Thanks, Erica. I mentioned when I talked about Net Promoter Score that the way that it is measured is with a survey. You have to actually ask your customer what their willingness would be to recommend the product or service, right? So customer effort score is very similar. It has to be based on survey data. So essentially you have to ask your customer, there's really 2 questions that work really well. What was the perception of the amount of effort that it took to get the situation resolved or the purchase made? But the follow-up question is just important and reflects back on something that Kay just said about competitors, which is the second question should be, how does the effort that you took compare to what you believe it should be, right? So there's a comparison kind of thing. Sometimes something can be quite difficult, but sometimes if I have a tough interaction, I know I have a complicated story. I know I have something really complicated, and if it does take a little bit more effort, I understand that, and so the measurements should balance those 2 things. So short answer is it is survey data. The good news is that if you're doing Net Promoter Score today, it's a very similar kind of process that you would follow.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sheila. So I have a question for Kay now. You talked a lot about reporting and analytics, and one of our audience members wants to know if you could give an example of a reporting and analytics tool.
So without taking time to get into the Genesys solutions, most often you will have a real-time and historical reporting tool, and then a centralized database that lets you add the analytics solutions to layer those on top. I'll be happy to reach out to you and address that in more detail after our webinar today. Genesys has a tool called InfoMark that I would love to talk with you about.
Excellent. So, Kay, I have another question for you. And this one is a little bit about the back office. So you talked about using a system to manage offline work. Can contact center leaders actually use workforce management to manage back office employees?
Great question, and absolutely the answer is yes. So your workforce management solution should be able to manage back office as well as those agents who are taking the real-time and email type of contacts as well, and then being able to not only manage that but to report on it and to look at the picture across all of your channels, including back office, is absolutely something that you should be able to expect your WFM solution to do today.
Great. And just a quick shameless plug here. ICMI is actually hosting a November webinar with Genesys all about back office workforce efficiency, so stay tuned for that. Let's see. It looks like we have just a couple minutes left, so Sheila, I'll toss one more question back out to you. One of our audience members wants to know, how do I get started with proactive engagement? Does it require an additional license or application?
Great question. And it's sort of a two-part answer. And the first part is that it does not require an additional license or an application. Proactive engagement is often about just using the technologies that are available today in your contact center in a different way. So think about your outbound dialer. Very often outbound dialer applications are enabled for applications that do auto dial. And remember, that's a permissible kind of thing according to regulation if that is an existing customer. So things like reminder calls, appointment reminder calls can probably be set up with the outbound dialing solution that you have today by setting up an automatic dial application campaign. Okay. The other part is sometimes it may require a new kind of application. So, for example, if today you're a voice-only contact center, right? Email may be being handled by a third-party company, or you may not be doing web chat at all, okay? So as you look at the possibilities for proactive engagement in your business, you may find that there are channels that you're not using today that would make sense from a proactive engagement standpoint. And in that case, you would want to sort of, do the things that Kay's talking about in terms of modernizing your contact center. I gave the example of my electric company using Twitter. A lot of companies are not using social yet. And so, again, as you look at the possibilities for proactive in your business, you may find that you do want to expand your technology choices.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sheila, and thank you again, Kay. Really appreciate you guys sharing your expertise with us today. And unfortunately, we have run out of time. So just another reminder, if we did not get a chance to answer your question here and now, we will make sure to answer all of your questions that are left in the queue offline. And if you do happen to think of any other questions, feel free to shoot us a note on Twitter. I do want to remind you that you can download a PDF version of these slides through this console shortly after we end. And I do want to mention before we go that this presentation is copyright 2014 by ICMI. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by ICMI, which is solely responsible for its content, and Genesys is responsible for their content and opinions. So, on behalf of ICMI and our sponsor, Genesys, we thank you for attending today, and keep an eye out in your inbox for instructions to view this presentation on demand. Have a great day.